Welcome back. I'm back with House Judiciary Committee Chairman Bob Goodlatte. And, Mr. Chairman, you just told us that you are expecting Jim Comey to withdraw his motion not to appear and, in fact, to appear in front of your committee later this week.
That's correct. That's where the discussions are headed. I think that will be made official with the court soon. If for any reason it doesn't happen, then the parties will be back in court tomorrow morning. As I indicated earlier, I think that the legal precedents are very, very powerful. No district judge has ever quashed a subpoena issued by the House Representatives, and the Supreme Court has been very clear on the sanctity of those subpoenas.
Jim Comey's talked a lot about going public versus private. Explain the difference, because I know that if you're in a private setting, he can just say, oh, that question is confidential and classified, I can't answer it. So can you get more answers in a private setting versus a public setting?
Yes, because the format is one where our counsel will ask questions for an hour. The Democrats will have an opportunity to ask questions for an hour, then back to the Republicans and back and forth until all the questions have been asked that need to be asked. Whereas in a public hearing, if people have watched those, they know that each member gets 5 minutes. You can't even ask more than 2 or 3 questions, and certainly can't ask any follow-up questions in that fashion. So someone like Trey Gowdy or John Ratcliffe, who are experienced prosecutors, and others who are experienced investigators, can't pursue the long lines of questions that need to take place. That's why this needs to be done in that setting. However, we share Mr. Comey's interest in transparency. We expect all of these interviews that we have transcribed thus far to be made public, but we have committed to making his public very quickly after the interview takes place. The public
when you interview him this week, I mean, that's sort of the final thing. I mean, the American people want accountability here, Mr. Chairman. Do you think this investigation goes away in the House once you step down?
Well, that's a very good question, because if I were a Democrat, I'd be concerned about some of the actions taken by Mr. Comey and others in the FBI leading right up to the election, announcing a reopening of the investigation into Hillary Clinton's email, and then announcing again immediately after that it was being shut down. I mean, there are a lot of things that we've learned in the background of that are going to come out as a part of this that I think should be of interest to every American, and every American should not want the FBI being weaponized, as some have claimed, by the Democratic Party when they, created the situation in which a dossier was then used by the FBI to get a warrant from the FISA court. These are all things that should concern every American in terms of protecting their civil liberties and making sure that their elections are free and fair, and we don't want to see the FBI handling investigations like they were in the future.
Well, look, I mean, it's a shame that it has come to this, where you only have a few weeks left, and now you're seemingly going to speak to him, because we know that there was FISA abuse, and we know that there was leaking against the law. So we'll be watching that. I am really interested in seeing whether or not he is going to keep that promise and speak to you later this week. We'll be watching. Let's talk a bit about what work you've got to get done before you step down. And, of course, you've got an upcoming deadline, and there's potential for a government shutdown. Do you expect you will have the money to fund the wall and the government will stay open past December 7th?
Well, I think the issue with regard to funding the wall is a matter of how many dollars are going to be agreed upon. In my opinion, that's important, but unfortunately what will probably not be a part of any final deal here is what the president and what the administration really needs, and that is closing of a multitude of loopholes that deal with issues like asylum fraud, that deal with issues like so-called catch and release, where people are given a hearing date, released in the interior of the country, and never show back up for their hearing. The president and the Department of Homeland Security are being very valiant, the Border Patrol, in stopping these attempted invasions at our port of entry there in San Ysidro, California. But that's not the right way to handle this. We need an agreement with Mexico, and we need our laws changed so that people who are not supposed to be in the United States can be returned home expeditiously.
Are you expecting a better rapport or agreements with the new president of Mexico and President Trump?
I don't know, but I know that there are serious discussions going on with that new administration. So I guess we can all be hopeful. This is not in Mexico's interest to have the situation down there as it is right now.
Right.
And it's never in the interest of a country to be the transit for people coming across it, many of whom are known to be convicted criminals. Some are suspected terrorists. This is not a situation that's any better for Mexico than it is for the United States. So they ought to work together to work it out.
So are you expecting a government shutdown?
I hope not. I'm certainly going to be staying here till the end of my term to make sure that that doesn't happen. But it's also important that the parties all come to the table and be reasonable about those negotiations.
And then you've got an upcoming hearing with technology CEOs. You've got Sundar Pichai, CEO of Google, testifying in front of your committee. Tell me about this and what you want to get from him. There's speculation that these technology companies, who are now more powerful than they've ever been before, are censoring conservative conversation. Is that your main issue?
That is one of a number of issues. There are also antitrust issues. There are also issues related to how Google and the other social media companies raise their revenues based upon what they put in front of the viewer. There are also privacy issues. We have a number of issues to discuss with Mr. Pichai, who was scheduled to come in on Wednesday. I expect that because of President Bush's state funeral on Wednesday that we'll have to put that off until next week. But we're expecting that to occur, and it's very, very important that it do occur.
So you'll put Sundar Pichai off till next week. What about Jim Comey? Does that get impacted from the H.W. Bush proceedings?
We expect that there will be days later in the week that we'll be able to do that. That doesn't require the entire Congress to be in session like a public hearing does. That we're still working on the details of that, but we expect that to occur later this week.
All right. We so appreciate your time.
Not during the funeral, but later.
Mr. Chairman, thanks very much for your time this morning and, of course, your great service to our great country. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Maria.